Well, good morning, everybody, from the Kennedy Space Center. The countdown clock is holding at T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes. We went into that hold about 7 minutes ago. I'm a little bit late for the start time, but that's all right. Um, Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm um, not going to set up a camera right now. Um, this is going to be kind of like I mentioned in the title. This is kind of a pregame show. This is going to be an all-day thing. Probably going to be going until midnight uh, or thereabouts. So, um, but they are showing the countdown clock here in the Kennedy Space Center News Center. Okay, good. Thanks, Lucas. So, and so I think as I mentioned before I came on in the chat, um, the there will be. This is a little bit different than sitting in a hotel room, so I will probably have to run out and run back. Um, there will be some dead time here, but I'm hoping to stay on, sort of on and off for the next several hours while we wait to see first what the mission management team decides to do here in the tanking meeting, which should have already started, and then how the initial part of tanking goes. And that's, as I've said before, there's sort of three phases to the wet dress rehearsal in terms of what they're trying to evaluate. This is the first time they've tanked an SLS Block 1 vehicle since Artemis 1. So they're just evaluating the entirety of the system with all of the upgrades that they've made in the last 3 years. And then after the vehicle is loaded, then the closeout crew will go out to the white room and do the full closeout of Orion, minus the crew, of course. And then, let's see if I can bump up the volume, try not to talk too loudly, but um, the after Orion is closed out, then they have a a long time to basically uh, complete the entire terminal countdown twice. And so the idea is to run. Let me know if that's a little bit better. I tried to kind of bump the gains up on the volume without, so I don't have to shout in here. But those are sort of the three phases: the propellant loading, closeout of Orion, and then final countdown, and doing these test objectives that they had tried to pick up with the Artemis 1 wet dress rehearsal back in the spring of 2022, but we're not able to do that due to the issues that they had in April and June of 2022 with the original wet dress rehearsal attempts back then. So today, what they would get, okay, good. Thanks, Christopher. Um, one of the things they will get out of doing conducting two terminal countdown runs is to get a data point in the large sense of how long it takes for a real vehicle in real launch conditions to recycle from a cutoff inside the terminal countdown, recycle all the way back to T minus 10 minutes. And really, that's the easy part in terms of recycling the clock back. But then they have to get the vehicle recycled completely to be able to pick up the count at T minus 10 minutes again. And they're only going to have 2 hours to do this for uh, for a typical launch window with all of the other constraints, including crew on back time, for instance. So those are the three phases that we're going to be looking for here today. Right now, the mission management team should be meeting. Let me see if I can pull up the. Again, this was my best guess at a timeline. There are other places online that that have sort of a running uh, timeline of what should happen, but this is kind of the overall timeline for the first part of the operation today. Mission management team meets. Um, they should give a go for tanking, assuming everything is okay, and then we should start to see the tanking process begin in the next hour or so, maybe a little bit more than that. And then those are going to be the things, uh, the initial things that we're going to be looking for. Pardon me, are um, just the start of the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen chill downs, the transfer lines from the storage spheres across country lines up into the mobile launcher, and then all the way up to the especially the core stage umbilical plates in the tail service masts. So um, and that'll be the first part, and then you've obviously got other valve complexes that are in between on the mobile launcher. Hopefully, we don't have to get into too much of that detail today because things will just go smoothly. So, um, we will see. Right now, basically, we're just waiting to see what. Um, yeah, that's right. Uh, I did see Punxsutawney Phil. Um, Somebody spoke for him, but yeah, not the greatest news for um, not the greatest news unless you like winter. So the but yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I was gonna see. I took a couple pictures out here on the grass, so I did finally get a chance to look at the RS-25 engine, air quotes. So that's a we'd heard that that was likely a Rocketdyne era, early space shuttle era, space shuttle main engine. The differences between the two are um, they're not negligible, but there are differences. So, for instance, aside from things like uh, wiring harnesses that are not complete anymore, it's a shuttle era engine controller unit, um, which is a big black boxy thing. The new engine controller units that were designed and implemented uh, for SLS by Honeywell, with they're the subcontractor, and then L3Harris is obviously the prime contractor for the engine. But those are a little smaller, but they still take up kind of the same volume of the on the engine on the power head. But it is interesting to look at, especially to look at the power head and look at the interfaces uh, on the front of the engine, the inlets, the low pressure turbo pumps, the six pack, things like that. So, but let me know if you have any questions. But yeah, we're just gonna, and as I mentioned, I'll mention it again. We're in the hold at T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes. The hold began about 15 minutes ago, and so we would see the clock pick up in 2 hours from now or thereabouts. Um, so that would be 11:40 a.m. Eastern time, and uh, so let me well, so I will pause here and see if I can um, pull up some pictures of just some pictures that I took a few minutes ago before we started. So as Bryant's asking about the temperatures. I guess the one thing I would say is that the temperatures and the winds are lighter, the and so the wind chill's lower. I don't know that that necessarily matters in terms of, it matters for us who have to be outside in it from time to time, but um, the it is a little warmer. I did end up. I used to live in Portland, Oregon. I still have a Fred Meyer ice scraper. Since I needed it 2 weeks ago, I thought I might need it this time. It actually came in handy this morning. Um, so it was a little frosty, but not too bad. And the temperature is over freezing already, when at least the air temperature, minus the wind chill. But this reminds me of, I used to live in Atlanta as well, and this reminds me of one of the dry days in the wintertime that you would get. Let me see if I can get. The one of the things, so Brian's talking about the I assume talking about the solid rocket boosters, and one of the upgrades that they made from a is to the field joints for both the case-to-case field joints and the case-to-nozzle field joints, which is to replace the actually the original motors. Of course, the pre-Challenger or Challenger motors had their original design. They were then significantly redesigned after 51L. Those included joint heaters on the case-to-case interfaces. But they also, for when they upgraded from shuttle to the 5 segment boosters, which were originally the first stage for the Ares 1 vehicle, they they uh, they incorporated new O-rings that are lower temperature O-rings, and so they actually deleted the case-to-case joint heaters. But having said that, they probably the minimum temperature that they can launch with probably still factors that into account. So I'm going to take a quick peek and see if I can pull up a picture or two. This will grab this. So not that it's a little this is kind of what it looks like. This is kind of what it looks like at the press site outside. And then let me see if I don't know if I can. I may have to. I'll have to bring this up again with a different. It is not being quite as. But just a quick shot of. So this is the power head for that space shuttle main engine that is out on display, and you can see here this is the old this is the old shuttle era main um, engine controller unit. There's different terminology for it. And while we're waiting here to find out what we're waiting here to find out whether the mission management team is go for tanking, and tanking could begin after that. It's, I guess, a question of how quickly tanking could begin. And so that's a good question that about what what are the low which systems may drive the low temperature constraint. And we know that in the blog posts they've been noting that Orion has stayed powered up for cold weather protection. So that's but um, they do have some measures that they can take to keep the vehicle and to keep the spacecraft um, within limits. So and then I'll just that's probably good enough in terms of let's see. And so this is more or less a live shot of the vehicle. This not sure exactly where this is, but somewhere south of the Launch Complex 39B area. The and so the mission management team will be discussing everything. They'll make sure everybody's ready to go. They'll make sure that so we haven't heard some of the other milestones that they would be. I've got this in the wrong place. I'll go back. Let me go back a page here. But so I don't believe we've seen an update since yet from the one that was posted yesterday. But they were supposed to have cleared the blast danger area and cleared the pad, cleared everybody back past the roadblocks a couple of hours, 3 hours ago actually, and then they would have switched the purge air, the environmental control system purge air, over to ground or to GN2 to gaseous nitrogen, and that would be in preparation for tanking, and that was a big deal for the first launch campaign at the very beginning. We have again, perhaps in this case, no news is good news. They would have already started to uh, the ground launch sequencer would have already been activated, and now we're now in this hold, and the tanking meeting would have started uh, somewhere in the last hour, probably, maybe since 9 a.m. anyway. But there will be, but they will talk about the readiness to tank the vehicle. They'll talk about any issues, so and any non-conformances or anything that needs to go all the way up to the management team, and then and then they'll decide. And there's probably some lag between when they decide to um, when they make their decision, or maybe that takes them longer. Maybe they're going to be discussing it for a while. It just depends on. But the weather might not necessarily be um, the only thing that they're discussing, and they may also be discussing not just um, issues, but just making sure everybody's ready to go. Okay, so Dave's asking about would if they chose not to, how quickly would we know? That's a good question. Um, we're we'll be here for we will definitely be here all day, one way or the other. So the um, and then I'm planning on being here all week at Kennedy, and then the day before launch or the day before the first launch attempt. Although again, I have to be careful about that. But sometime, let's say that let's say they hold to the no earlier than Super Bowl Sunday, February 8th date. I would be going to Houston the day before that because and I'm going to cover the mission from there. But I have this whole week here to get a better understanding of what's going on with Artemis in general, and then Artemis 2 specifically. And then Brian's asking about the government shutdown. So we're now in this partial government shutdown situation. So NASA NASA was funded in a minibus, which was signed into law, I believe, on January 23rd. So there's no impact, there's no direct impact on NASA that some government agencies are technically in this uh, in a period where they're not funded. But so and that's more or less off the table for NASA right now, at least until September 30th. So but where we should be now, we should be over here, and as I said in the slide, sometimes there's a lot to talk about, sometimes there's a little to talk about, and we'll just have to see. We'll just have to see when we get an update uh, from NASA about what the mission management team has uh, decided to do. It could be, yeah. Anthony's saying it does kind of the view of the vehicle does look kind of like it's from the observation gantry. I guess I just can't remember. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've been on that. Uh, how what 39B looks like from there, but you're probably right. So yeah, if anybody wants to nudge nudge, wink wink, um, give us a hint about which way things are leaning and when, that would be all right with me, I'm sure. But I think everybody, we're just waiting to see where the next step is whether the mission management team is go for tanking, and then they will go, uh, and then we will start looking for updates on the actual process itself. And then I guess just uh, bigger picture, this is meta inside baseball stuff, but just in terms of um, my plans for for this stream and then for the rest of the day, um, NASA spaceflight's going to begin streaming somewhere in this neighborhood, but they're going to be streaming all day, and so I think right now I have a couple of shifts that run from about 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. And so I will, depending on how this goes, I'll figure out when to wrap this up, go scarf some food down, and then be ready to do to do a couple of shifts with NSF, and then and then we'll be watching to see what happens um, for the after the closeout crew is done, and the how the final countdown goes, and then the recycle test that they want to do, that would be part of a second terminal countdown run at the very end of the evening. And then, of course, um, we would probably go home at that point once the second terminal run concludes and they get into detanking. But of course, the people that are on console have to continue to work to do the detanking. So Stephen asks if I'm going to attend any briefings. If yes, I will. I will attend whichever ones I can. But I don't know that we have a schedule of briefings at this point for this week. I think there will definitely be one if there's a flight readiness review meeting, briefing, or meeting, and then there would be a post meeting briefing. But we don't know whether that is still to be determined and then to be announced. And then I don't know if that will double as a post wet dress rehearsal briefing as well. It might, just again because of, I was mentioning this in the members live stream last night. There's the timeline between today and a possible launch attempt on Sunday. The launch window would be Sunday night, but they will be busy. The countdown would start on Friday. So just between now and Friday, this time on Friday, they have to they have to finish this test, um, look at the results of the test, conduct the whole agency level flight readiness review, and then start the countdown for launch. So within all of that, I don't know how many briefings we're going to get. So, but we will see. There will be other opportunities to talk to some people, um, but as you can imagine, folks folks who are on console this morning, and maybe overnight over in the firing rooms in the launch control center, those folks are probably not going to be available. They're going to be really busy during the week. So, but then we will get. I imagine we'll hear from management one way or another this week. Uh, so there we go. All right. Thank you for the heads up. Is this the first update of the? Okay. What time is that? This was. Okay, so this is basically very. um, it sounds like this is confirmation that they've made the switch over of the purge from air to GN2, gaseous nitrogen. But I don't believe they put they quantify how long it takes for them for the purge to reach the point where they are ready, where that is ready to support tanking. But that does say at the end, okay, so at the end it says Artemis launch director Charlie Blackwell Thompson and mission management team will poll whether to give a go for tanking operations around 10:45 a.m. Eastern, following a briefing from the launch weather officers with the U.S. Space Force Space Launch Delta 45. Used to just call it the 45th, but still. So I think that so what that tells I think what that says is that all of the vehicle preparations and all the ground preparations are complete, so to speak. That they are in a configuration to where they're waiting for for the missions management team and the heads the leaders of the launch team to pull and whether they're go for tanking. But they're still meeting right now, and so they're talking about 10:45 would be about 45 minutes from now. But we'll see. Again, I think it is possible if they don't have a lot to discuss, then it's possible that they could do that poll earlier. But it's also possible that that could drag on as well. So somebody's asking is will they uh, will they announce a launch date before the 5th? I think the 5th is Thursday. I guess it's possible. It's possible that they could that a flight readiness review could happen on Wednesday, but it's also possible that it takes a little longer than that. So we will see. So it is possible if you consider that the countdown for launch, if they were going to pick the 8th, and they only have at this point they only have 3 nights. Those 3 nights beginning on the 8th. The and as we're seeing today, it'll be relatively similar because the launch windows do move forward in time a little bit, but um, we would be in this same kind of discussion, same kind of timeline on Sunday morning, maybe a little bit later, but sometime around late morning, midday on Sunday. So it'll be all day. It would be all day Sunday, and then they have the next 2 nights after that, the uh, Monday night launch window, and then a Tuesday night launch window of the 10th. But then the launch window is again where I'm calling Tuesday night into Wednesday. You know, so again the window on the 8th is um, Sunday night into Monday, and so on. So they've got 3 opportunities that they can make launch attempts, and so there's a little bit of there is a deadline here, um, which is the night of the 10th, with the launch window beginning on the really opening right after midnight local, relatively speaking, on the 11th. But let's see, Lucas is asking about the the hydrogen leaks that they had in 2022 with the first launch campaign. They did they made they made several changes. The leaks they uh, they had one valve leak. The leaks that they had prior to the last launch attempt were it's a quick disconnect connection. So I mean I'm trying to think of it's not like putting the when you put gas in your car, for those of you still who still drive gas. Actually, most people still drive gas cars, but still, um, it's not quite like putting your um, filling your car with gas, but it is similar where you've got a connection, and those can be a little bit temperamental if that seal is not if that doesn't seal correctly. But that's the kind of it's maybe a little bit more like if you've seen um, like Indy cars, that kind of when they come into the pits and they top off the fuel tanks, it's like that. Um, but then you're talking about with liquid hydrogen, talking about not that far from absolute zero. So they made sure that that the measurements that they were more precise in terms of how they lined up the umbilicals and the quick disconnects on the umbilical plates, and they also modified the uh, launch commit criteria for the allowable uh, concentration of hydrogen within that very small volume between the umbilical plates, and that is still being purged with gaseous helium in the case of the liquid hydrogen umbilical plate. So the last, and then the one valve issue that we know about was the one that they were able to fix relatively easily. And I say relatively, but the valve on the liquid hydrogen skid in the mobile launcher, which was not a connection to the vehicle, it was back, you know, upstream of that. Then, um, but they were able. That's the one they sent the red crew out to the pad for, and they didn't. They were able to resolve that during the countdown. So that I think I don't know that there's necessarily the expectation. I don't necessarily want to have any expectation about what's going to happen today, either good or bad, because we did see that they made changes after the second launch attempt for Artemis 2 in early September 2022. They did a tanking test. They had some issues at the top of that, but they were still able to fully load the vehicle, go through the entire loading sequence, including the pre-pressurization sequence that they hadn't been able to pick up at that point, and then they did all of the stuff for uh, they did the entire sequence for the third and final launch attempt with without any issues in terms of those long-standing issues that they'd had through uh, April and June, and then August, September of 2022. So the valve skid issue was separate from all of the issues that they'd had during the launch campaign. So, but the thing is that they're doing this. They made the strategic decision at some point, either probably in 2024, to do the tanking test now with Orion mated, and rather than do it earlier, like last year in maybe the late summer or early fall with just SLS. And at this point now, they also have the other thing that they're evaluating is the Orion closeout and that timeline. So we didn't. I tried to get a feel for how much of this, what the priorities are, maybe in terms of how they're what they're using this test to evaluate. Um, whether it's how much of it is Orion closeout, how much of it is verifying all of the upgrades that they made of the system, because again, this also includes the second liquid hydrogen sphere and all of those connections into the ground infrastructure. That's new for to that's not new for testing purposes. They tested all of those connections up to the mobile launcher, but today we should see an entire end-to-end test going through the entire countdown procedure with flight hardware, and that's another objective that they get out of this test. So I but yeah, I don't necessarily expect, but then you're really just trying to keep trying not to have any expectations about what we're going to see today. Um, so, but obviously very interested in what we do see. And so, I think somebody was asking the one of the questions here is, or I guess is kind of a rhetorical or maybe just a statement. of, yeah, if they had something that they needed to fix or that took a few days to resolve, then yes, there is a deadline for launch attempts in this launch period 17. And so the deadline would be, again, depending on how you want to call it, either the night of the 10th with the but the launch window for that night is uh, after midnight, so technically February 11th. So it just depends on your time zone. So if you look at if you look at the launch opportunities in UTC, they're all past, they're all later in the morning even. So that technically, if you were just looking at the UTC times, the launch windows all open. It would be uh, the morning in UTC, the morning of the 9th, the morning of the 10th, the morning of the 11th. But yeah, there's not, given the circumstances and given that they weren't able to conduct this part of the test on Saturday night, that gives them they have 2 less days to resolve issues. And so, and again, there's also the one thing about we I'm assuming that there is time to do this, but one thing that we did not see is the flight crew walk down of the emergency egress system. I think that's called countdown demonstration test part 2, but it's not going to be a full uh, terminal countdown dry dress rehearsal. And so there should be time to do that after they get the vehicle inerted, after the test tonight. Maybe not Tuesday, but certainly by Wednesday they would be able to do that. And so, and we're, I guess, waiting to see when the crew flies down here. So in terms of scrub turnaround capabilities, assuming we with the caveat always that if they have a scrub, you don't know what you're dealing with until that happens. But let's just say the weather is marginal and they have to scrub on the 8th, the night of the 8th. Then they have they have the technical or the capability from a storage capacity standpoint now to do a 24-hour recycle. So they could come back on the 9th, the night of the 9th, and um, do a second launch attempt. Then the question though becomes, if you haven't made it after that attempt, the capability, uh, all things considered, they were talking about a 48-hour recycle from a second attempt to a third attempt, and that would not fit within the opportunities they have for this launch period. But then we've also heard that just purely from a liquid hydrogen storage standpoint, that they have I guess I would call it theoretical, or maybe it's more than that, but they have the capability to do 3 attempts in a row. It's just that that would be asking a lot and maybe asking too much of the launch team to, especially this time of the day and with the sleep shifting going on, to be able to do that. But it's also the kind of thing NASA likes to be prepared for any possibility. I would certainly wonder if that is something that they've discussed privately, is whether or not they could, would it be possible if you got into that situation, and you had one time or one opportunity left, would you be willing to try and take that opportunity? So, so then again, it depends on it. You can sort of tease that out of the question is, if they miss this opportunity, will they keep the vehicle out of the pad till March? They are set up to do that, so I think they would prefer to do that, but it depends on what the issues are. If it's something that they can resolve at the pad, then they'll do that. If it's something that they can't resolve at the pad, then they'll have to come back to the vehicle assembly building. So the but I mean, so one of the examples would be because they have such a limited their opportunities to launch within a given launch period are more limited due to the issue with the heat shield on Orion and how they chose to resolve that for this flight. That further limited their launch opportunities within a given launch period. So, um, it, just as an example, if you had, let's say it was even colder than we've been talking about the last couple of days, and the cold temps or some combination of weather criteria did not work out for them, and they missed, and they could not, they were able to make attempts and they weren't able to launch. Um, in that case, then there isn't necessarily anything that you need to come back to the vehicle assembly building to resolve. But again, it will just depend on what what the factors are that are involved in um, not making, not being able to make, not being able to launch within this launch period. But they do have that capability that Eric's talking about to access the access specific parts of the SLS solid rocket boosters, at the top of the boosters, and then the core stage inner tank, that would allow them to do a flight termination system retest on the pad. They have not done they haven't, everything is fabricated. They haven't necessarily been able to do a fit check, but they would, I'm pretty sure they would want to utilize that capability rather than just automatically come back to the vehicle assembly building. So I guess for those of you who are joining right now, we're in the countdown for the wet dress rehearsals in a hold. The countdown clock is currently holding. This is a planned hold, 2-hour and 15-minute hold at T-minus 8 hours and 10 minutes. The countdown clock will pick up at 11:40 a.m. Eastern. Right now, the clock's holding for the mission management team and NASA management to decide whether or not to tank the vehicle for this test. And then there would be two more holds, two more planned holds until terminal count. The next one would be a 40-minute hold where the clock would stop at T-minus 3 hours and 30 minutes. And then there would be a 30-minute long hold when the clock gets to T-minus 10 minutes. So, but right now we're waiting for, and NASA did post an update. Let me see what the time tag reported in the blog was. It said 9:44 a.m. So about half an hour ago. And so the update, what the update mentions that the the mission management team and the launch team are expected to poll. They're expected to take a poll of everybody to see whether they're ready. They're go for tanking around 10:45 a.m. But it is possible, I suppose, it is possible that if the discussion doesn't take that long, that they might do that poll a little earlier. But it also could take longer, and they might do it a little later. So um, I'd say we're probably standing by here, just waiting to hear what they've decided to do, and it might take another half hour for them to get to that poll. And basically, then, and I'm going to just, for the most part, stay here and take questions and just, and then, but every once in a while, I will probably have to take a break because once they get into the tanking process, that does take a long time, and we'll have to see. There will be periods of time where we can take a few minutes of breaks for this or that reason. Let me see if let me make sure I didn't miss something here. Will we actually see anything during the wet dress rehearsal? If they do the terminal countdown runs we would see things like we would see the crew axis arm would retract, would swing back to its fully retracted position, and then when they cut off and recycle, it would then be extended. And if you saw some of the video of the swing tests that they were doing a couple of weeks ago, then you would have seen something that looks like the how long it takes to uh, retract and extend the arm during the during terminal count. It's relatively quick on purpose, and that's one of the upgrades that they made to the mobile launcher after Artemis 1, um, getting ready for this first crewed launch of Orion and SLS. And this is basically for for this system. This is their crewed demo after the uncrewed demo on Artemis 1. I'm Brian's asking what the differences are between the SLS wet dress rehearsal and a Starship wet dress rehearsal. Um, I'm not sure that the test objectives are. I'm not sure. I because I haven't seen too many Starship wet dress rehearsals, but it does have the same kind of um, it does seem to have the same kind of objective, which is this is as high a fidelity test as you can get for these systems, where you're basically you count down inside of 30 seconds from ignition, and all of the systems for the most part have to be ready in a condition to launch inside of 30 seconds before you cut off and call it a day. And that's a similar type of thing. In terms of individual test objectives, there's probably differences between both of them. And so in a way, the differences between them, they don't completely boil down to the differences between the systems, but that's a good way of looking at it, which is the the differences in the systems and how complicated they are and what you're checking. But it is a very similar high level objective, uh, which is to finish the last hours of preparation for the vehicle and the spacecraft before launch. And you count down, as I said, you count down inside of 30 seconds from ignition, and you're testing to see that everything performs as it should. You're using the exact same criteria for continuing a countdown, and then when you get down to a predetermined cutoff point, then you stop and recycle and detank. But that gives you that it's the highest fidelity test of a launch countdown and a launch. And so, as an example, the the engines one of the things they had to get around in the Artemis 1 wet dress rehearsal in June of 2022 was they couldn't get the RS-25 engines properly chilled down because of the leak, quote unquote, leaks that they had at the time. But one of the things you'd be looking for in a terminal countdown is that the engines are ready to start, which means they all have to be in their start boxes, which is temperatures and pressures. So they have to be within the right ranges, and so you're executing all of the late chill down, the the high flow bleed of liquid hydrogen through the RS-25 engines that you do very late in count. And so all of the launch commit criteria basically have to be satisfied all the way up to the point where you cut off. If there's something that isn't satisfied, then that doesn't necessarily it isn't necessarily a black and white good or bad test. It's just that we have to we'll just have to see. But that's the objective of the test, is to verify that the vehicle it's the the most thorough way to verify that the vehicle is ready to fly. There's the question about the weather criteria. Let me see if I have that. I should, but I don't know if I have it on this computer. This is a little different than. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. This is a little bit different than Okay, I can do this while I am. Well, I'll just have to bring it up on the other screen and read it. The criteria that we were looking at was the criteria for there's a low temperature criteria that they have to be above in order to start tanking the vehicle, to start doing the propellant loading. But I don't know if that's completely applicable to throughout a countdown. Um, so let me see if I can find. Okay, so no, that's the maximum. Okay, so it says do not launch if the temperature at these levels that they're measuring at drops below. So I guess the reason that it's complicated. So it depends on a combination of wind speed, relative humidity. Um, so it depends on those factors, and so the temperature could range from different temperatures. The from 38 degrees Fahrenheit to 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, it says depending on the wind and relative humidity. It says higher wind and higher relative humidity result in a colder temperature constraint. So it does mention that. So I'm scrolling back a little bit. So Eric asks if they have to roll back, can they even make the March window? Uh, Probably unlikely. But I think that's the idea is they've tried to give themselves the the best chance to be able to stay out at the pad for the next launch period. And then I think at that point, then there would definitely be a question about whether they could stay out for the period after that or not. Um, but that's a long ways in the future. There's a lot of things that can happen in between now and then, and hopefully launch attempts as well. And again, the idea would be there's a lot of what ifs here. So there's also the possibility that that they meet all their criteria on the first launch attempt and they launch and start the mission. So that's always a possibility too. Um, I think next question was how many rollbacks is SLS certified for? I mean, this is where you get into the difference between a generic, what the vehicle's generically evaluated to support or certified to, and um, then having to do a flight specific analysis. So we saw that with the solid rocket booster stack life. So generically, the boosters are certified under a very broad set of circumstances to for them to be stacked for as long as 12 months. But then because they knew that these launch campaigns to begin with were typically going to take longer than 12 months, they took additional measurements and have done additional analysis so that they feel like they're comfortable going out to, I think they were talking about 18 to 24 months, and that for that particular uh, life limited operational life item. Um, I think for rollbacks, it'll depend on, uh, there. One of the other constraints is cumulative time on the pad. So I think they revised that down to, actually, I don't know if I can say cumulative or not, but they talked about pad stay, the a pad stay duration of 120 days, and I'm sort of assuming, but I'm not sure. But that's perhaps a generic constraint for um, time on the pad for both Orion and SLS, and so um, we would have to, like, if this is one of those situations again, like with the contingency pad access and some of the other things where if we got up to that, started to run up against that constraint, then we would probably have to ask for a judge's ruling, so to speak, on what does that mean, what can they, what could they do, and so, um, but this is they're trying to set up this time so they don't have to roll back. They rolled back with the capability that they have now. They they would not have had to roll back as many times as they did during the Artemis 1 launch campaign. Um, and the, and if you recall, for Artemis 1, they they made their first two launch attempts. They had issues. They stayed at the pad rather than roll back. They fixed the hydrogen tail service mast. So they disconnected it. Um, you know, um, checked all the gaskets, checked all the seals, reconnected it, did a tanking test, and we're getting set up to make a launch attempt in mid-September. But then a hurricane came along, and so that's probably one thing that we don't have to be concerned about for at least a few months is any tropical weather systems. And so um, from a time of year standpoint, there are a few less um, things that you have to worry about. But the last rollback was because of a hurricane rather than because of a technical issue. The I think they rolled back three times. So they rolled back in. Um, they went out to do the wet dress rehearsal in April of 22, and they rolled back because of the gaseous nitrogen issues that they had at the time. Um, and that would probably you could call a sort of an unplanned one. The one in June they rolled back, that was the one that they planned on, where they went out to do the wet dress rehearsal again. They did it, and then they came back to get the vehicle ready for launch. And then the last one was because of the hurricane. So, um, and so they have additional capabilities now to stay at the pad and do maintenance on the vehicle. It's still limited, but we will see. I think everybody's hoping that we won't see actually that they will be ready to fly at the end in this window, and they will fly. So we'll just have to see. We're waiting to see if we get a go for tanking here in the next 15, 20 minutes or so. There's the question: what's the latest the wet dress rehearsal needs to be completed by? Um, or I, there's not too many more days because of the additional programmatic work that they want to do between the wet dress rehearsal um, and the first launch attempt. So they're going to conduct the flight readiness review, the agency level flight readiness review for the mission after this test, and that is a um, that's something along the lines of an all day meeting. And so as I was saying earlier in the stream, they're doing this test today on Monday. If they were going to start the countdown for an attempt on the 8th, that would be on Friday. And so there's time to do that in there, but they probably won't be ready to do that even if they're able to finish this test tonight, so to speak, setting aside stuff like post-test cleanup like detanking and inerting the vehicle. They probably, I would say Wednesday's the most likely earliest date that they could conduct the flight readiness review. So they were talking about a day for day slip if they were to slip this again. So they probably only have a couple 3 days, I would imagine, where if they can't get this test done by the middle of the week, then they probably will run out of time to recycle. Now, having said that, we don't the there's maybe a little more flexibility in terms of doing programmatic reviews than there is for just time to recycle hardware. And so I would, we'll just have to cross that bridge if we get to it. So, but they don't have a whole lot of time to complete this test before they would run out of time in the February launch opportunity. So no, this is uh, SLS is an expendable vehicle, so they will not be recovering. The only part of the vehicle they are recovering is the crew module for Orion, and everything else is expended, and it's pretty much like, I think, there aren't that many, there still aren't that many systems. There aren't that many systems being designed without reusability now, but there are still most of the larger heavy lift or medium lift launch vehicles are still mostly expendable, especially if you're talking about something that goes up to orbital velocity. So you don't see a lot of second stages that are recoverable yet. Starship is supposed to be one when it's fully developed. Um, Space Shuttle was one, but there aren't that many yet. So then the question was, like, see, how long can SLS hold after being fully loaded? It's not, well, it's more depends on what configuration you're in. So um, this vehicle has up to 2 hour long launch window. Let's see if do we have a frozen. I'm not keeping an eye on the stream, but the stream looks like it might have frozen, or maybe it did for me. No. Okay, the picture looked like it had frozen there. Um, if you want to, so let's see. So if you want to if you want to check for the NASA updates on their blog, the link is nasa.gov/blogs/Artemis. Um, but in terms of holding, again, the vehicle can hold in kind of a stable configuration before they get into the terminal count for several hours. It's once you get into terminal count, then there are distinct phases of the terminal count. So um, you can count down and hold at T minus 6 minutes and stay there for a couple of hours. But once you get inside 6 minutes down to T minus 1 minute, 1 minute 30 seconds, if you hold in there, then you only have 3 minutes of unplanned hold capability, because there are no planned holds between 10 minutes and liftoff. It's just that they have the capability to pause and then resume if they have some sort of an issue that they need to quickly discuss. So again, they can hold for a while, for a couple of hours, at up until T minus 6 minutes. From T minus 6 minutes to T minus 1 minute 30 seconds, they have about 3 minutes of unplanned hold capability, and that's one of the test objectives today that they want to confirm and evaluate. Once they get inside of 1 minute and 30 seconds, really you don't there are other constraints. It's not necessarily keeping the propellant and the vehicle propellants conditioned um, for liftoff. It's just that once you get inside of T minus from T minus 90 seconds to T minus 33 seconds, if they were to have a hold, they would automatically have to recycle back to T minus 10 minutes. And then once you get inside of T minus 33 seconds, if there's a cutoff or a hold, then you're basically you're done for the day. So it would be essentially an automatic scrub the if the uh, if the countdown is stopped inside of 33 seconds for one reason or another. But it will be, yeah, they could be holding for they they can hold in stable replenish, because again, this is a vehicle that stores its propellants near boiling point. Um, so these are not densified propellants. They're not super cooled propellants like Falcon and Starship. So yeah, so again, where we are based on the one NASA update that I saw at about 9:45. Let me check and see, just out of curiosity. But what they said was they the they were expecting a go no go poll at 10:45, which is basically in the next 7 minutes-ish. In the next 10 minutes or so, they should um, do their go no go poll for tanking, and hopefully after that we'll hear relatively quickly after that what they've decided to do. It it at least seems a little bit less cold, less windy today, but that's very qualitative and not going to not going to work for necessarily for making a decision. The I think the NASA has a large countdown clock out in the out out sort of not quite adjacent to the turn basin, but outside. I don't know if they have that on screen right now. That clock is currently showing an L minus time. Here inside the news center, we can see the T minus time essentially, um, which gives at least some idea about is the very broad outlines of the countdown being, going as expected, because they can they can hold the count in other places if necessary out here. But right now the countdown is in a planned hold at T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes. It's expected to pick up in about an hour at 11:40 a.m. And the hold, the duration of the hold was supposed to be 2 hours and 15 minutes. So the countdown clock. So again, to finish the thought, the countdown clock outside is really showing you how much time there is until 9 p.m. Eastern, or somebody was saying, I can't remember if it was 8:50 p.m. Eastern or 9 p.m. Eastern, but it was an L minus time. Um, but that doesn't necessarily tell us what's going on with the countdown. It just tells us how much time there is until 9 p.m. local. so, um, so this is there is at least some it gives you some situational awareness about where the countdown is. The fact that they held right on time at 9:25 a.m. Eastern, and so we'll be watching to see that they pick up um, in just about an hour from now. But we should also find out what the mission management team and launch team leadership decide to do here in the next handful of minutes. And so that's correct. The, I have not gone outside in a while, but I think they're showing that on the NSF live or on Space Coast Live, the NSF stream. But that doesn't as far as I know, unless they changed it, um, that's showing the time until 9 p.m. Eastern. Here in the news center, the clocks are holding at T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes as planned. The the temperature limit for starting for what it says for initiating tanking is said to be, no, let me go back and pull it up again. So there were two limits that we were looking at just because of where we are. So one of them was do not initiate tanking if the 24-hour average temperature at the elevations that they measure those, they're measured above ground level. But if that 24-hour average temperature is less than 41.4 degrees Fahrenheit, that would be the low temperature limit. There's probably some context there that would be valuable to know. But then it says do not launch if the temperature at those same elevations drops below a temperature constraint, which depends on the temperature, the wind speed, and the relative humidity. And so they were talking about temperatures that could, low temperature constraints could be somewhere between 38 degrees Fahrenheit and 49 degrees Fahrenheit, as it says, depending on the wind and relative humidity. And then it says higher wind and higher relative humidity result in a colder temperature constraint. see if I can. I will try and crank. I'll try and increase the volume here a little bit more, but I'm also trying not to. I don't know. Let me know if that's a little bit better. I don't want to shout too much inside here because this is a shared shared space. So they will not broadcast the go no go. We will not hear uh, any launch team audio today. We will only hear, but we will get updates from the NASA blog. Um, and I mean, this would be, you know, it's just short of 10:45 a.m. Eastern. That was the time when they were sort of estimating that there would be that the mission management team and the launch team would do their polls. But hopefully we will get something relatively quickly after that. But we don't know. We will not hear instantaneously. We will not hear in real time the decisions. We won't get any of the live decisions in real time. Not today, anyway. I'm quickly scanning some other sources to see if anybody has anything to add. But I don't see anything at the moment. We will, so as I said, we were likely to hear at the same kinds of things that we heard for the final countdown for Artemis 1. So we heard the launch director poll, which is the final poll. So there is a launch team poll that's conducted, I believe, by the NASA test director. We heard that during shuttle. We don't hear that now, as far as I know. But we will be hearing the crew. My understanding is we'll hear crew communications while they're on the pad, but we won't necessarily hear launch team updates on the countdown net until closer to the final countdown. And so the question about the win criteria, whether there is any difference between the wet dress rehearsal and launch, there may be a additional criteria for launch, given that you also have to consider things like pad abort and perhaps downrange recovery. So there may be some other criteria that come into play. But in terms of preparing the launch vehicle and the spacecraft for liftoff, the criteria should be very similar. So we're just waiting here for. I'm sure that, like everybody else, we're waiting to hear what the launch team and the mission management team decided to do. And so somewhere around now is when they were was the last estimate we heard about when they would make their decision. And so we're just waiting to hear what that is. So while that's going on, and so probably what probably what will make sense to do is once we get that decision, then there will be a little bit of a, I don't think it's a lull is the right word to put, but it might make sense to, but then there will be a long period, assuming that they're go for tanking, there will be a long period of time over the next couple of hours to follow along what's going on. But then I will probably take a break in here somewhere after we get some idea about where things are going for the rest of the day. And I actually one of the things I wanted to do is somebody mentioned that they're setting that they have another stream set up, and I did want to go snag that information. And if they once they start that, then I can. Okay, so they do have a stream, and maybe we will get some real-time updates or something like that when that starts. And so I'm sort of bookmarking that so that I can switch over to that. Okay, thanks for the heads up that that stream started. The and so let me know. I'll let me know if they provide any updates, any situational awareness on that stream, because that would be a lot easier too. Then maybe we will get something approximating real-time updates at that point. So let me go ahead and I'll go ahead and plug that in. Looks very similar. But maybe we will get maybe we will get some updates on the ticker. So yeah, it is possible. It is possible that no news is good news, as what Lucas is saying. So since they started, but hopefully we will get something more explicit than that here shortly. But I'm not hearing anything. But again, I don't know how much we're going to get in terms of sort of context about the test on the stream. But it is still valuable for in case there is something. If there are switched views, for instance, even if it's just an occasional thing. So we'll just keep an eye on this. So I'm going to take care of a couple of things here, but I'm still, maybe I should do it that way. No. That's correct. We didn't, somebody's asking we won't, or saying we won't hear the loops. That's correct. For the Artemis one, the wet dress rehearsal attempt they made in June 2022, we did get live commentary for that for that, and then we did also get it for the tanking test, and then obviously also all of the launch attempts. But in this case, where the as far as we know, the plan is not to provide any live commentary during this test. So they, yeah, as you see in the chat, they could probably slide the test another day or maybe a couple, but there's not very much time left um, to do this test, um, and then make a launch attempt by the end of this opportunity in early February. So I'm just snagging some of these links for future reference. But yeah, we're still standing by. Countdown clock is still in the hold for another 45 minutes or so. The clock's currently in a planned hold until 11:40 a.m. Eastern, and we're waiting for word on what the mission management team and the launch team decided to do, whether they're a go for tanking or not. The I missed something there. Yeah, if for some reason they um, if they had to, if they needed another week for whatever reason to do the test, they would probably do it next week. It's just that, yeah, at that point, then the earliest opportunity would be the launch period in March, March or launch period 18. Pardon me. And then there's I think it's the same number of days. I think there are 5 days in that launch period where they have opportunities to launch um, around the same dates, because it's February is very similar to the lunar month. So somewhere around March 6th and so on. But they could conduct the wet dress rehearsal at whenever they're ready. There's no celestial mechanics constraints on when they can conduct the test. It's just in order to be ready to launch, they only have so much time left in this launch opportunity to do that. Yeah, I don't. I'm not. I'm not expecting comms to be broadcast over the radio. I think those are all uh, they're all privatized. Although again, it is, since they are made public late in the count, it is possible that they're doing that um, not just for broadcast, but or not just for live streams, but also for broadcast. But you won't have that situational awareness until the very end of the countdown. If they decided to wait a day, for instance, for the weather where they are, it is possible. I believe it is possible for them to stay in this configuration here, in this pre-tanking configuration. So they wouldn't necessarily have to recycle back to the start of the countdown. And so it would be something along the lines of a 24-hour turnaround. Um, I believe that they would have that again, barring some sort of an issue that's come up. No, I'm still here. If you can't hear me, it's I am trying to take care of a couple of computer maintenance things right now, and so actually, so uh, keep an eye out for. But I am also trying to keep an eye on the Artemis blog. I don't see anything. We're a couple of minutes short, or maybe even less than that, but we're approaching the 11 o'clock hour here in the Eastern time zone, 11 a.m. Eastern. Countdown is in a planned 2 hour and 15-minute hold. At the clock is currently holding at T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes. We're currently waiting for word of whatever decision the mission management team and the launch team made in terms of whether they are go or no go for tanking today. I think once we get a decision, then there will definitely need to be a little bit of there'll probably need to be a little bit of a pause. Um, and so I will probably just leave things up here. And again, for those of you who can sort of have the ability to have multiple streams up, um, you will get there are definitely other streams going on right now. And then, as I think I mentioned earlier, I'm at some point this afternoon I'm going to be doing a couple of shifts with NSF NASA space flight, and somewhere in there I will have to take a little break. So yeah, as I said, we're standing by waiting for word on the decision about go or no go for tanking. If if they had if they were go, then it is possible that they've gotten relatively that they've started into some of the activities, like chilling down the cross country lines from the storage spheres to the mobile launcher. So they would start the liquid oxygen pumps that are uh, around the liquid oxygen sphere. They would start spinning up, I believe, one of the pumps, and they would have others that are warm standbys, I guess is what you'd call them. And then for the liquid hydrogen, that's a pressure fed system. So it is possible that, again, we can't see it from this view, but maybe from one of the other live streams, when we get to the core stage liquid oxygen main propulsion system chill down, you might start to see some venting from the drain lines on the RS-25 engines. I think, unfortunately, this angle that we have on the NASA live stream kind of obscures that, or mostly obscures that. just take another. Nope, don't see any blog update yet. The but yeah, we're just looking. We're keeping an eye on um, nasa.gov/blogs plural/Artemis, and then I'm trying to I'm trying to do a couple of computer maintenance things um, in parallel. Okay. All right. So there's one. I've got one other thing I need to do here, but I don't want to. I'm still here. I'm just quiet for the moment while I'm doing this, and but then eventually I will have to get up, but not yet. So, and that is a possibility, which is that we just have not got we just haven't gotten the word necessarily. So it is possible. So again, for instance, if if you start seeing venting from the engines, that would I think we could conclude that that they they were go for tanking. But as I said, um, maybe under these circumstances, it's hard to tell whether it's given it's colder, but maybe not quite as humid, um, that we would be able to see the purges actually drop below the below the mobile launcher that we can what we can see of the mobile launcher platform here. This again would be a situation where if you had a view from the angle of the press site, for instance, and you can at least kind of see the engines at a long distance, then you might be able to. Okay. Did they? I did not catch. Did they? So I see that it says launch director to give the go for propellant loading, but does that? Did they actually say in there that did they actually say that there was a go? Because there aren't those aren't necessarily the same as being ready to go. um, but it is possible because we saw this with we saw this during Artemis 1, where the MMT gave the launch essentially gave the launch team a go to begin propellant loading when they were ready, and so this would be a second or a secondary or a subsequent gate after the MMT. So, but I'm not sure. Yeah, it's definitely a good sign. Um, it's definitely a good sign if they are finishing up any final preparations that they need to do in order to begin propellant loading. But we have not seen, as far as I know, we have not seen a blog update yet. It's possible that it went out on another social media platform though as well. I'll refresh it one more time, and then I'm gonna do this one other thing, and then we'll just stand by here and because once they give a go, then you still want to see that they've started the process, and then there will be a little bit of time to do those chill downs of the cross country lines, and then you begin to chill down the liquid oxygen side of the uh, core stage engine compartment. Yeah, this is why that's correct, Kevin. That the the test window that begins at 9 p.m. and runs until 1 a.m. Um, they that is possible that they should be able to they should be able to um, get to the terminal countdown within that somewhere within that time period. But as we were talking about, there's likely to be an hour, if not more than an hour, between the two terminal countdown runs. So the the plans for the I can bring those up. Although let me continue to the as far as I know, the countdown clock outside the big countdown clock is showing the L minus time. So the L minus time for that would correspond roughly to 9 p.m. Eastern, which would be the opening of the test window. Right now, the countdown clock itself is still in the hold at T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes. So that's the first of three planned holds um, today. And so it started holding, it began a 2 hour and 15-minute long hold at 9:25 a.m. Eastern. We're still holding for another approximately half hour until 11:40 a.m. Eastern, and then the clock should pick up again at that point. Yeah, it is possible. It is very possible that I paused it on mine. Oh, okay. Or maybe it just locked up because I can see that now. It may have just locked up. But okay. And so yes, the the clock that they're showing on the live stream is basically just counting down to 9 p.m. Eastern. But that does not necessarily correspond to when they will uh, when the first terminal countdown run will be synced to. And so the countdown is still in the first planned hold. It's currently holding at T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes, and it should pick up again at 11:40 a.m. Eastern. So it's about 28 minutes from now. So we seem to be going through. We're seeing all the indications, although they're limited, but we're even though we don't have any explicit, as far as I know of, explicit note that the mission management team was go for tanking, that it still does seem like they are continuing the timeline, and we won't be able to see anything without a closer view that we're getting until a little bit later. And so we were talking about the flare stacks last night, and I don't know if we can see those from this view, but those would have probably already been started. I'm not sure whether they will activate both hydrogen flare stacks or not, whether they need both or whether one is enough. But if you guys see anything on social media, let me know. So yeah, as far as I know, we will get, again, looking at the feed that we're getting right now, we'll probably get some um, updates in the ticker, but we're not expecting any live commentary. And um, what we're and I'm not sure that we're necessarily going to get um, additional views of the rocket. We didn't get a detailed um, description, but the expectation was that we would get a view like this, and then we would get a live stream, but we were not expecting live commentary, and that the updates, and generally speaking, will be through social media. So there are a lot of the detailed elements of the fueling process, like chill downs of the cross country lines, chill downs of the vehicle lines, um, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen slow fill, and then liquid hydrogen fast fill, and then eventually liquid oxygen fast fill as well. But assuming that they were progressing on both of those timelines, which they were planning to start at exactly the same time, that the we would get to liquid hydrogen fast fill sooner. But then again, that just depends on how things are going. I think we are expecting a more we're expecting what I guess I would call full coverage on launch day. Yeah, I appreciate the restaurant um, uh, tips, but I'm not planning on going outside the gates until the test is concluded today. So I'll have to go over to the cafeteria um, or see what's in the car. And so I'll check and see. I'll keep an eye on a couple of other sources just to see if we're getting anything from anybody. But this is in some ways this is we're in a situation where no news is good news. So let's see. I'll at least it's still 20 minutes in the future, but I'll probably um, I'm going to hold off on. I'll stay here at least until 11:20, which is when the countdown clock is supposed to pick up again at T minus. It'll be T minus 8 hours, 10 minutes, and counting at that point. But we don't really know what we're going to get in terms of updates for for today. I would imagine here that uh, on launch day we'll have live commentary, for instance, and we'll have a much more of a real time situational awareness of what's going on. Yeah, I can try and speed up and catch the which I've paused now, but let me see if I can speed it up a little. I can speed up a little bit, but it's unfortunately not going to help in terms of um, it's not going to help in terms of getting 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 the context more quickly. So really, at this point, we're just waiting for we're waiting for something more explicit that they're go for tanking, but or something that's just more either something that's self-evident, again, like purging, seeing the core stage liquid oxygen main propulsion system chill downs, and we might see purges from the main engines from the RS-25 engines. I'm fall back into shuttle terminology from time to time. But if we see that, then that will at least give us uh, that would at least give it would be self-evident that they've gotten a decent ways into the liquid oxygen side loading for sure. We won't see anything from the liquid hydrogen standpoint because that is all kept contained for flammability reasons. And so I don't think, again, the way that this shot is framed, I'm not sure we can see either of the hydrogen flare stacks, which are out much closer to the storage spheres themselves. And those two spheres are kind of out um, on the eastern perimeter of the pad. So they'd be off to the right. So so we switched back to, as far as I can tell, we've switched back to the go for propellant loading still being referred to in future tense. So I guess we're still standing by for that. So this is one where it's not exactly straight up whether or not uh, whether or not no news is good news or bad news. um, um, I'd rather just yes, I'd prefer real time situational awareness, but this is just what we're going to be. Uh, this is where we're going to be for a little while. So one of the reasons that these holds are that this hold in particular is relatively long is that they may still be able to uh, catch up on the timeline. So it is possible that they could start quote unquote late on the timeline and still be ready to um, and still be able to maybe sync up with with the hold at T minus 3 hours and 30 minutes, where that's approximately when the closeout crew, when they'd want the closeout crew and the flight crew to be sort of given a go to go to the pad. It's just that the closeout crew will be stationed out here closer to the pad, and they'll go out to the white room. Uh, they'll probably be out there about 15 to 20 minutes ahead of the flight crew. So they're still, uh, pardon me, I'm not sure whether or not uh, that means that their targeted T0 uh, will change. I would imagine this would be a situation where if we saw the L minus clock change, that would be an indirect reflection of that, though. Yes. Okay. I guess it's good. I'm not sure. It's not a it, I it's good that you guys are giving me a little bit of running commentary that you're seeing just as a double check. So I did see the ticker. The ticker was wiped at least temporarily, but again, it also maybe they're updating something. I don't know. I uh, we didn't necessarily hear anything about that there would be a sort of a running ticker, but they did do that for the last Artemis 1 tanking test. So that would that's a place that we could see some updates, but we were looking for them on social media. There we go. And so they just posted an update. Go for tanking. So this is nasa.gov/blogs/Artemis. So I'm just going to read this here. 11:25, so a couple minutes ago. Um, so that's pretty close to real time, a couple minutes. So they gave a go for tanking at 11:25 a.m. Eastern. They're monitoring cold weather, not tracking any weather constraints to tanking operations. And so they're saying, well, yeah, this is a little there's a little bit too much conflation here. Um, so I'm not sure. So they're talking about slowly filling cryogenic propellant beginning at L minus 9 hours and 25 minutes, but I don't know if that means the chill downs or the vehicle chill downs because they're separate. They start with they're working their way from the storage spheres out to the vehicle and chilling those lines down slowly, and so you're working from outside in, and so the process doesn't immediately start filling the vehicle with propellant. So I don't know if that means that the chill downs begin at L minus 9 hours 25 minutes or not. But hopefully we will get hopefully we'll catch up to, at the very least, that we'll catch up at some point. For instance, like with slow fill of the core stage propellant tanks. Oh, okay. And so yeah, my feed froze again, or maybe it's just the maybe it's just the. There we go. Okay, so they are running a ticker now. Yeah, it's I guess that's just a glitch on my computer. So it is locking up a little bit. But again, this will be a case where it'll be better. Um, the NSF and some of the other folks that are doing this who have more broadcast capabilities than, who have decent broadcast capabilities will be able to handle this a lot better. and so that I'll just be playing a much smaller role in that. I hope so. I hope that the wording there that they're talking about, that we will get some additional views um, that are a little bit closer to provide a little bit of situational awareness. But we were advised to keep our expectations relatively uh, relatively low. So I'd asked, for instance, if we were going to see the closeout crew in the White Room today, and at least the what I'd heard was no. Um, that doesn't mean that they can't change their mind, but that was not the that was not the uh, I have not heard if that's the case. So I don't know. Are you seeing? I don't know where you're seeing the indications about when slow fill, because there's a difference between the predicted times and the actual times. And so what we'd be looking for is, again, actual confirmation that they've started a particular that they've actually that a milestone has been achieved versus when it's when it's planned versus when it actually happens. So I don't again I don't know. um, right, and that's the problem with the it's not, as I said, it is not clear what milestone in the timeline they're referring to there. So I don't know that they're necessarily referring to. They don't specifically call out. They would not, and they would not typically reach slow fill on liquid oxygen as soon as they would on liquid hydrogen, because liquid hydrogen, because it's a much less dense propellant, um, it takes less time for them to chill the lines down. Um, because liquid oxygen has a density of water, it requires pumps, and they and and then because of that, also because of that density, they have they have to manage that differently. So they have to protect against geysering in the lines. And so, because when you fill the liquid oxygen tank, because it's up, especially in the core stage, since it's up above the liquid hydrogen tank, the propellant goes into the vehicle in the engine section, and then it goes up both uh, liquid oxygen feed lines. So it runs up the sides of the liquid hydrogen tank, and then goes back into the inner tank, and then up into the liquid oxygen tank sump. So, and they have to protect against geysering in that situation. So it's because they're not making a distinction. They're not making a distinction between chill down, slow fill, or fast fill, and they're not making a distinction between liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. You sort of get the feeling that they're just talking about chill down, but they're not making there's a lot of conflation going on there about the process in that statement. It's basically more of a general statement that they're going to begin they were going to begin the process at about that time. About, I guess that would be about this time. Again, I am seeing that the feed that I have up here on the computer is a little. It does lock up from time to time, and it's a little slow. But I will try and uh, catch it up. or relatively speaking. I'm just going to speed it up, but that they would begin, whatever that means. That's one of the milestones would be at around this time, and we're about 5 minutes away from the countdown clock picking up. And that is something that we do have an indication of here in the news center. So the clock is still holding for another approximately 5 minutes at T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes. Oh, it should be. So again, there's still going to be a lag. So at least as far as I can tell, the feed that I'm seeing is not stuck at the moment. So let me know. So right now I'm showing L minus 9 hours, 24 minutes, give or take. But we did get the go, according to the blog post. We did get the go for tanking at 11:25. Yeah, I see. I should. Well, let me go back. I'll double check. But it is live. Right now, it's live. So I'll go ahead and speed. If I increase the playback speed, eventually it will catch up. Yes. It's not quite. So when it says live, it's more or less live, with the plus or minus being how big your buffer size is. So it's close to live. So the only place where you're absolutely real time will be here. Um, or again, if you had some sort of if you have a hard line, then maybe fiber optic line, then sort of. But yeah, see what I am seeing here today is every once in a while the feed will lock up, that I'm seeing that's going out in the display. So I've noticed that a couple of times now. Pardon me. But right now, so I'm not sure when the next update we will get. So it might be, again, so far they've been pretty sparse. So we'll just have to see when the next one is. But I will wait at least until we see the countdown clock pick up here. But I would say that's expected now that they've given a go for tanking, about 15 minutes ago. Yep, that's what I did. Well, or maybe usually I'll try and find somewhere between 1.5 and 2 times, um, just to catch up or get closer to real time on the stream, because eventually it'll catch up, unless you're way behind and you put it at like 1.1. But yeah, but standing by here for the countdown clock to pick up in the next few seconds. So, and that in theory should be relatively close to real time. Ouch. There we go. So the countdown just picked up. So we're 8 hours Yes, T minus 8 hours, 10 minutes and counting, and picked up on on time, and but we'll still need to see. We'll still need to see when um, we'll still need to see how things go. So the thing about the venting from the engines is the visible venting, the overboard venting, um, will only be oxygen, will only be gaseous oxygen. They do not vent hydrogen into the open air. So all that is still vented. It's just not visible because it's all captured with vent lines. So that's the whole thing about not about seeing a confirmation that a particular operation is performed, and they have separate teams in on the launch team in the firing room for liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. So if you had if you had an issue, for instance, on the liquid hydrogen side that was slowing you down, you might still continue with the liquid oxygen um, timeline, and so you might see venting, and the venting that we would see only gives us the clues about the liquid oxygen timeline. It doesn't automatically tell us whether or not. That's why we're going to have to. That's why we're going to have to see what we get in terms of updates. Um, at big picture. So yeah, and so there won't be any there will not be any obvious self-evident uh, thing that we will be able to see. The only place the only place that we would be able to get a real-time visual indication would be uh, display consoles, console displays that showed us that information. So we won't get we will have to get an update from NASA about the status of liquid hydrogen, uh, um, the milestones in the liquid hydrogen loading for both the core stage and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, the ICPS. And that was one of the things that we did see in the timeline that was published, is that they have chosen uh, to overlap the liquid hydrogen fueling and start the ICPS liquid hydrogen chill downs and filling before they finish, before they get to the topping mode and the stable replenish mode for the liquid hydrogen tank on the core stage. And so, but we're still a ways away from that, and we aren't necessarily going to get, we won't get that type of real time commentary necessarily until launch day. So we're just going to have to wait and see how that goes. Um, so again, I would say if we're looking at sort of the bigger benchmarks, I guess, then obviously the big one from based off the Artemis 1 experience would be when they get all the way to liquid hydrogen fast fill, which is several steps in the future. But then when they get to that point, then we would be looking, then we would be waiting to hear that everything is still, that they were seeing the hydrogen concentrations that the hazardous gas detection system was registering, that those were just stable. That would obviously be that would obviously be what you'd want to see or hear. But this is this whole thing about what does no news mean? Is no news good news or bad news? And sometimes, in some cases it can be one, some cases it could be the other. But we should hopefully get another blog post, not necessarily right away, but we should get more blog posts here in the next, couple of hours, because we will want to see. Uh, but again, it just depends on there's more interest, I think, here than necessarily in general about particular milestones in the fueling process. Um, but yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice to get some sort of a uh, confirmation that they were into hydrogen fast fill and they weren't having any issues. And we'll just have to see. Uh, we'll have to see what we get because it is, um, as I mentioned, I'm planning on joining the NSF NASA spaceflight stream at somewhere around 2 p.m. And so I will be wrapping this one up for sure before then. I guess if I had to, and so we'll just have to see. I hope we get some sort of an indication um, about the status of the um, of tanking way before then, probably way before. I would say, if I had to guess, I'll probably go until about 1 p.m. Eastern, which is about another hour and 15 minutes. Um, and then that still gives me enough time to um, take care of a couple of things. And then we'll just have to see. And then, as I was saying last night on the members live stream, we'll have to see how the rest of the week goes. But I am planning on being here um, through the work week. And then I would go, if assuming that this test goes well, I would go to Houston on Saturday. And again, assuming things go well, the first launch opportunity would be on Super Bowl Sunday. So, but that's so we'll have to see what happens with we'll have to see what happens with um, the coverage today. But um, there will be other things going on here during the week, and so for Artemis 2, they would, assuming that this test goes well, they would begin detanking um, in the overnight hours. It'll take some amount of time to get the vehicle completely inerted so they can open the pad back up for access. You have to do that. Then you have to switch the purge back to air from GN2, and then we would be looking for an estimate about the when the flight readiness review might be conducted, whether that would be, I wouldn't assume it would be on Tuesday, uh, uh, but maybe Wednesday, but it might not be, again, we'll be looking to get some sort of an estimate on when the flight readiness review would be conducted. And then, and that's one thing I think we're looking for during the week. And then the rest of the time, there will be time to be getting big picture context and little picture context as well. And that's what I'm planning on doing is talking to some of the people down here about all the work that they're doing, um, all the Artemis work that they're doing. Because I mean, like I'm sitting, in the news center. The VAB is over here to the is just over here. You've got the two engine sections for Core Stage 3 and Core Stage 4 are in there uh, uh, being worked on. You have you have the Orion spacecraft for Artemis 3 and Artemis 4. Um, all of that hardware is over in the operations and checkout building in the industrial operations zone where Lockheed Martin does assembly and test. Um, and then they're continuing to outfit Mobile Launcher 2 over here. They're getting ready, which would support Artemis 4. There's also other work that they need to do here that Exploration Ground Systems needs to do here for Artemis 4. And I would be interested in a status update on any or all of that if I can get it this week. The let me see if, but yeah, there is more activity in here in the news center right now. So um, I'm going to check and see if there's any. Maybe it might be more realistic to look for an update after we get to the top of the hour. We're just now about to hit. We just hit 8 hours and counting on the countdown clock. So that, which means it's 11:50 a.m. Eastern. But I don't see any, again, considering how the the tanking process was described in the last update, where they talked about the entire process of loading the tanks, top off, replenish. um, there are several milestones in that process, and some of the ones that I was talking about that we would be more interested in than less. Um, and so I'm not sure how much of that we're going to get. Um, and so if they started chill downs about 15 minutes ago, then what would that mean? I'm just going to look at so that'd be, again, this is speculative, but then that would mean that they started the timeline about 45 minutes later than uh, than the predictions. So, which would mean that we would be getting into that interesting part of, actually both of those would be liquid oxygen slow fill and liquid hydrogen fast fill are both are both bigger milestones in the process, because again the liquid oxygen slow fill is where you're getting into that point where you're the process where you're dealing with making sure that you're not getting any geysering of the downcomers of the liquid oxygen feed lines that run up to the liquid oxygen tank. And then the fast fill is obviously where they were seeing elevated hydrogen concentrations during the last launch campaign. And so we would be waiting to see if we were going to get waiting to see what it looked like this time. And that would be, rather than around noon, that would probably be that would be closer to 1. But hopefully we will get some sort of an update in the next hour. But I'm probably going to have to sign off somewhere um, around that time, unless there's something, if things are going normally, even if it's a little bit late, then there wouldn't necessarily be I would probably sign off relatively on. If we get something breaking towards the end of the stream, then and it would make sense it makes sense to continue for a little longer, then I'll do that. So yeah, just I need to take care of, yes, things like lunch, and um, it's possible, again, my stream locks up on me sometimes. So thank you for definitely point that out. That's me, that's not NASA. That's me. That's my glitch. So I need to go in and let me. So yeah, actually, or actually, maybe it's OBS. No, that was me. So the countdown clock, and the countdown clock is continuing to tick here. If that stopped, then that would be. So yeah, that's a me problem. That was not a NASA problem. So yeah, if you see that, let me know, because that means that's much more likely that it's a me problem. Okay, okay, and so that's important. So it says on the ticker, it says at 11:42, it says uh, the chill downs for liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen are underway. So the so I'm taking that to mean that that they're starting the overall process, where the they're starting to slowly flow both liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen from the storage spheres to, across the cross country lines, because the storage spheres are way out on the pad perimeters. um, for safety reasons. And the so yeah, definitely. I'm not sure what I was looking at over here, but yeah, that if you see the feed on my stream freeze, it's probably me. But anyway, the um, what it sounds like is that we're at that point. So 11:42. So what does that? That means would be about an hour. That would be at about an hour later than I was showing for um, or that the original timeline was showing. It was more. It was around 10:40 a.m. was when they would get into the liquid oxygen or liquid hydrogen. Let me back up a page on this. Um, or maybe 10:50. Okay, so now we were 50. We were talking 45 minutes, 50 minutes, so somewhere around there. But it shouldn't take that. It shouldn't take that long. Um, they were talking about 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that, before you'd start to flow. Um, you start to flow propellant into the liquid oxygen lines in the core stage, and again, this is this whole thing about you're trying to avoid the geysering with the liquid oxygen commodity, and so they have to control the flow of liquid oxygen with pumps, and they will, because it's a denser it's denser, and um, so let's see, so 15 minutes. So yeah, we're probably talking about, but we're definitely things are some of the bigger milestones are going to be closer to 1 p.m. than 12. Um, So but we'll have to see. And again, it's also possible that some of these milestones within the process can happen um, sooner or later. I would imagine probably not too much faster than normal, but it could also take them longer. They could hit these milestones a little bit slower. Again, this isn't the first time that they've flowed propellants from the spheres up to the mobile launcher. It is the first time though that they've flowed propellants into this core stage um, and into the vehicle hooked up to the connected to the mobile launcher and connected to the pad system. So but we'll definitely be interested in getting some updates um, as we get closer to slow fill for both commodities, because that will be an indication um, that'll be an indication that they're starting to flow propellants into the stage, at least at the umbilical plates. So let's see. I'm sure I missed a question in here. I think somebody was just asking about do you think what do you think the chances are about this? Maybe not. I thought I saw somebody asking but that which is oh, here we go. It's right there. Oh, I scrolled right by it. Um, they still have, assuming that this test goes well, even if it takes them an hour, if they're a little late today, they aren't under any huge restrictions in terms of time, other than just larger. You don't want to be 5 hours late, but if you're 30 or 45 minutes late to getting the test done today, that's not a big deal. They're they still have a shot as of right now where things are to make at least one launch attempt in this launch period, and so they have Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night opportunities. And I think they still have a shot at Sunday night, which means that they would have a shot um, at making at least two launch attempts, at least as of right now. But we're just getting started with the tanking process, so there's that. And so there's the three sort of major phases of the test today are this part, which is where they're starting now, which is tanking the vehicle, and then mid to late afternoon, the closeout crew will be doing the Orion closeout, and then the end of the countdowns in at, during the nighttime hours, which will be the terminal, will be the terminal countdown sequences, and they're planning on doing 2 terminal countdown runs sometime after 9 p.m. Um, tonight. And so I think, I think if they get through this test successfully, I think it gives them a decent chance at making a launch attempt here. Um, again, on one of those 3 nights, and still having a shot to make a second attempt if they need one. Um, ideally they'd be able to make, but I think at this point, because they only have 3 opportunities left, it's likely that the maximum number of attempts that they would be able to make are 2. So I'm not seeing any. The last update that we have on the ticker right now is that they started the chill downs, the overall, what I take to be the cross country chill downs from the spheres up to the mobile launcher. And again, they call them skids, valve skids. There are valve skids for, I believe, both stages. So right now we're concentrating on the core stage, but um, there are valves that help control the flow of those 2 commodities um, for the different phases of loading, for slow fill, fast fill, topping, replenish. And this was a bigger subject of uh, uh, this was a bigger subject for the first launch campaign, about things like if you have a cryogenic valve, if you have a multi-position valve versus a variable position valve, the latter giving you more of a fine control over flow rates, and the former giving you set points, um, and not quite as much fine control, but control. And so they one of the things that we didn't necessarily get an update on was whether they updated a couple of the multi-position valves to be variable position valves. But I thought I'd heard something where they talked about the valves, um, maybe upgrading one of the multi-position valves in the hydrogen skid to be a variable position valve, just to give them more fine control over the flow, because that was one of the lessons that they learned, was that the ability to keep the hydrogen concentrations more stable was by slowly increasing the flow rates. And so let's see, I should probably check I mean, again, it would be nice if the ticker is a good sort of a one-stop place to catch updates. Um, but I can check the blog again here. Okay, and they did just provide an update about 10 minutes ago. Again, there's a little bit of euphemizing, so to speak, or so yeah, that doesn't necessarily make the distinction, again, for instance, between on the liquid oxygen side, for instance, between um, the transfer line chill downs and the MPS chill downs. So I'm gonna. So on the timeline that they published, there was 20 minutes from when they started the overall chill downs of the transfer lines from the cross country lines that are not in the vehicle. There was about 20 minutes from that point until the core stage liquid oxygen MPS chill down, and then liquid hydrogen slow fill began about 45 minutes after the overall chill down. So we'd be looking at, so that would be, so MPS chill downs would be around now. And I don't know that we would necessarily see venting right away, but we might. You might start again. I don't know if I'm hallucinating that or I'm seeing anything. And then we would see LH2 slow fill in that kind of 12:30, somewhere around there, 12:30 p.m. time frame. So let me take a look at the. Yeah, it's hard to tell. Like again, this view, the view that Spaceflight Now had, and the view, and I think a view that NSF has would be a better. Let me see if I can pull it up on another uh, on another screen just to see if. Oh, okay. I'm seeing some buffering there, but uh, I need to be a little careful with, because I'm trying to run this through a mobile hotspot. So um, now let me go ahead and I'll go ahead and kick the I'll go ahead and kick the stream here and speed it up again, so to speak. Catch it up. But yeah, we aren't seeing any. But this is we will probably hopefully we'll see something here relatively quickly. Um, the the clock that they're showing on the live stream, on the NASA live stream, is an L minus time, and so it is it basically reflects the time until 9 p.m. Eastern, which is the opening of the test window. Here in the news center, we have the countdown clock time itself. So right now, it's it's just about 12:08, and the countdown clock here is showing T minus 7 hours, 41 minutes, 30 seconds, or thereabouts. And that's accurate. The countdown clock they're showing in here is accurate. The time on my computers is not necessarily completely synced up. So, but they're close. So I mean, but the countdown clock is it reflects the fact that we only have two more built-in holds, and they're relatively short. So there's a 40-minute hold at T minus 3 hours and 30 minutes, and that's still a ways away. So that's what, almost over 4 hours from now. That'll be a 40-minute long hold, and then there's a 30-minute planned hold when the countdown clock reaches T minus 10 minutes. And so again, the three holds on launch day. There's the hold that they've already uh, gone through, T minus 8 hours and 10 minutes, which is the go no go for tanking. T minus 3 hours 30 minutes is the decision point about whether the vehicle is loaded with propellant and they can send the closeout crew and the flight crew to the pad. Today they're only sending the closeout crew. And then at T minus 10 minutes, that's the decision point whether or not everybody is ready to launch the vehicle, which means they're ready to pick up terminal count. Today, what that would mean though is they're ready to pick up terminal count, and the plan today is to make two terminal countdown runs. The first one the first one will run down to T minus 33 seconds. They will hold, cut off, and recycle back to T minus 10 minutes. The overall recycle process is likely going to take at least an hour. And then, but however long it takes, once everything is ready to go and make a second run, then they will make a second run. And the plan for the second terminal countdown run is to count down from T minus 10 minutes to basically go all the way through T minus 33 seconds. And then they would expect to see a cutoff sometime after that. The likely cutoff point would be once you get just inside of T minus 30 seconds, the SLS flight computers take over control of the vehicle at that point, and they begin enforcing vehicle side launch commit criteria. And so usually there's some sort of um, configuration that is not in launch. The vehicle is slightly not in launch configuration at that point. And so all it takes is any one violation and it'll kick out immediately. So the vehicle, these are computers that run the SLS flight computers process at 50 cycles a second, and so they can usually evaluate all sorts of things within that time frame. So we will, but that's a long ways away. Right now, we're just looking for. Right now, I think we're just looking for. Um, we're looking to see venting. This is not again. This is a not a good camera to see venting from the engines from because the engines are in between the solid rocket boosters under the core stage, and the view here is blocked by the two tail service masts themselves. So the gray, these gray structures are where the propellants flow from the mobile launcher into the core stage, and so they're blocking the view of the engines, and so uh, we can't, we won't be able to see. I'm relatively close. I should be relatively close to line. Yeah, well, I can always, I'll switch over again. I can always goose the feed again, um, and just make sure it's relatively close to real time. But there's not a lot of up. And I have seen a little bit of buffering here from time to time, so there's that. Um, but yeah, we're not expecting. I'd say given what we're seeing so far, we'll get updates. We'll still expect to get updates on social media, but also on the ticker that they're showing here. The I don't think this view has the liquid or liquid. I don't think this view shows the flare stacks for the because we can they're much closer to the hydrogen spheres themselves, and so we can't see them. But they should have started the flare stacks before they cleared the blast danger area. So that should have been done a while back. So, but they should be able to see those. Again, I'll I'll probably go out there and take a look myself. So you could see them. You might be able to see them from the press site. You probably can, but not from this view. At least, well, you can see it from this view depending on how you have the shot framed. But this is zoomed in, and I don't believe you. What you can see the lightning towers, you can see the water tower, but yes, it would be. It would definitely be. It would be an interesting situation to actually have the countdown going on during the Super Bowl. But we're still several steps away from that possibility. Um, I think all things considered, NASA probably would prefer to take, if they get the eighth, if they're able to take an opportunity on the night of the eighth, they'll take it because they're just trying to maximize their opportunities to launch within a given launch period. And so right now they're down to 3 days, 3 nights that they can make attempts. And out of those three, there are 3 consecutive nights. They can probably only make 2 attempts within those 3 nights. Um, but we'll have to see. That's also a long ways in the future. You'd have to see what the situation was if you made the first attempt and were not able to go. What exactly that is? What exactly caused that to be caused that? But yeah, we're just basically so here the right now countdown clock is in here in the news center showing T minus 7 hours 34 minutes and counting, and it will continue to count down to T minus 3 hours and 30 minutes for the second hold, and that'll be a 40-minute long hold. And then but that's a ways away as well. And so we're waiting to see the next update on the ticker. Um, the next milestones that were called out were core stage liquid oxygen, main propulsion system chill down, and core stage LH2 slow fill. And so those would be when they talked about those happening at around the overall chill down starting around 11:40 a.m. Eastern on the ticker. The Then that would mean we would already be looking for the core stage LOX MPS chill down, and then we'd be looking for core stage LH2 slow fill probably around 12:30 p.m. So in a little, not too long from now, but and I see this is where it locked up. So I'm gonna see if I'm gonna try not to. Yeah, so that's weird, but that again, that's a me problem. So I just need to goose. I need to goose my version of the NASA feed again, and then make sure it's not stuck. So if you, all right, it's so yeah. It looked like the feed that I'm relaying, so to speak, um, locked up here for a couple seconds. So uh, I can't see I can't see um, the fallback feed that I get from YouTube is changes. It sort of changes from static to you know. So I'm sort of having to rely on you guys to. I can sometimes see when it gets stuck here, and sometimes you guys are telling me. And so yeah, that's a good point, Eric. Which is yes, the NASA feed's fine. So if you see something sticking here, that's probably me. But again, I'm and so again, probably have about another 40 minutes here, and then I'm going to plan on just because we don't know what we don't know how frequently we're going to get updates here. And I think at this point we're looking for the next update, which would be that they've started into the core stage liquid oxygen main propulsion system chill downs, and that they're getting ready. That's a next step into before slow fill, and then for the liquid hydrogen side that they've actually started slow fill on the liquid hydrogen side on the core stage. The and so yeah, I'll be here until somewhere around 1 p.m. And then as I mentioned before, so I'll take questions and we're just watching the stream, just hang out until around 1 p.m. And then I'm gonna go over to the NSF live stream around 2 p.m. And then I'll be there until somewhere around 7 p.m. We'll just have to see how things go. Well, so just again to mention about the launch dates, if you look at the opportunities for this period that we're in now, launch period 17, if you look at the opening of the window in universal time, and I'll bring that up here, it is actually 3 consecutive days. So the ninth is shown as cut out because the launch window opens on the other side of midnight. But if you look in a different time zone, they are on consecutive days. And so okay, so as and so I see somebody mentioned so 12 so okay, so core stage LH2 slow fill has started, which is good. Um, but again, we're also looking to see about, and so again, I'm pure speculation here, but I get the feeling we're not going to see any intermediate steps, or we're not going to see the intermediate step called out on the ticker. So we would expect to see liquid oxygen slow fill. Let's see, about an hour after the overall chill downs. So they said, the overall chill down started around 11:40. So we'd still be looking. It this looked like it was a little early, but we'd probably be looking for the slow fill on the liquid oxygen side in a little while longer. But that's obviously, again, that's a good sign because it means that they're but then just to finish the thought on the launch windows for this, well, I'm in the wrong place. But the if you look at the times that the launch windows open on in universal time, or for instance where I live in the Pacific time zone, they're on consecutive nights, so to speak. So anyway, uh, the let me see if I can bring it up. I just need to find that it's on. I just need to find the computer that it's on. Or maybe I have it on. I wonder if I still have it over here. I don't know if I want to do that though. No, I don't. I'll try and keep the. Well, I'm just going to quickly check. That's the wrong background image, so I don't want to use. I'll stick with the. I'll find it. But anyway, the point is that if we just go with if we go with UTC, the launch windows that they have for February are February 9th, February 10th, and February 11th, but that's in UTC. I think the way that it works is, again, the launch windows open uh, here local time, Eastern time. The first one is 11:20 p.m., and then the next night, even though they're tanking the vehicle, pardon me, on the night of the 9th, the launch window opens after midnight on February 10th. So and so that's, yeah, there's a seasonal aspect to this version of the SLS launch vehicle because it launches into a highly elliptical orbit. So the launches tend to be, the launch windows tend to be closer, or tend to be at night the closer you are to the winter solstice here in the northern hemisphere, and then they tend to be in the daylight the closer you are to the summer solstice. And so there are no opportunities in this launch period, and I think I think in the next one as well, where the launch window is in daylight for any period of time. So right now here in the news center, the countdown clock is showing T minus 7 hours, 24 minutes, 40 seconds approximately and counting. Tanking started around 11:42 a.m. Eastern. The go for tanking was a little bit before that at 11:25 a.m. Eastern, approximately. And then we just saw as you can see on the ticker right now, slow fill for liquid hydrogen began about 10 minutes ago at 12:15 p.m. Eastern. The and yeah, so those are the launch windows, and so even on Sunday night, the launch window opens at 11:20 p.m. on February 8th, but it closes at 1:20 a.m. on the 9th. And so again, they're they have 2 hour they have a 2 hour launch window on all 3 nights that they have opportunities. So they can launch anywhere in that 2 hour window. And one of the tests that they're doing today is to quantify whether they can do 2 terminal countdown runs within a 2 hour long launch window. So the plan is to do 1 terminal countdown run as close as possible to 9 p.m. Eastern, and then it will take an hour and more to recycle the vehicle back to T minus 10 minutes and holding, and then they would count down once again, cut off at the very end, and that would be that, and call it a day or a night. um, okay, so they just updated it again. So now they're saying that the liquid oxygen is also in slow fill for the core stage. And so this is that point where they're doing that. They're doing they're managing the pump speeds to avoid geysering on the liquid oxygen side, on the liquid oxygen commodity. I'm not sure, as we were talking about earlier, I'm not sure how many press conferences we're going to get. We I think if they're if they pick if they are able to start a launch count by the end of this week, then we may get down around there. We may get a countdown status briefing, but I think during the week it's like we're only likely to get one press conference. Um, I think I was hoping that we would get a press conference, a post wet dress rehearsal press conference, and a post flight readiness review press conference. But I think what's going to end up happening is that's going to all there's going to be one of them to cover both topics. Um, and so, the thing is, if the wet dress rehearsal ends up being uneventful, then there will probably mostly be talk about what's the launch date when they do that. But it's also not clear exactly when the flight readiness review would occur, whether it would be uh, maybe Wednesday, but maybe not. Maybe Wednesday or Thursday, perhaps. But I mean, it's also possible. I guess it could even be as late as Friday. I don't know that we've necessarily. Um, but also it is also possible that we will get to talk to some people within Exploration Ground Systems. Again, they're going to be a lot of those people are going to be busy all the way until after midnight tonight. And so I'm not expecting to hear or see any of them tomorrow. um, okay. They did just put out an advisory for a, so maybe they're going to do, okay. Thank you, Dave. So, but yeah, I just got that email. But so maybe possibly a telecon. I don't know. I'll have to read it and see what it says. Um, okay, or maybe they are. Does it say who the? Okay, okay. So Amit Kshatriya. Okay, That's interesting. Well, again, I don't see anybody directly. These look like mission management team type people, other than Amit, who is the associate administrator for the entire space agency. But this would be exploration directorate leadership. Um, John Honeycutt, who's the chair of the Artemis 2 mission management team, was well, and okay, and an unnamed representative from EGS. So somebody, I'm not, I think maybe not Charlie Blackwell Thompson, but somebody from the launch team will probably be represented there. So, but this is good, at least for us, because it means then we will get a separate briefing to discuss post test, to discuss the results of the test tomorrow afternoon, and then it also says, okay, and it's also saying that if the test goes well, if the crew flies to the Cape for the launch, they're expected to arrive around 3 p.m. on Wednesday, February 3rd. So, and then subsequently, again, if the test is uneventful, so to speak, uh, I would still expect there to be some sort of a post flight readiness review um, briefing, but it remains to be seen when that would be. But yeah, so again, they're very again tentatively assuming that they're going to try and launch uh, at the actually I guess it will be the very beginning of next week. But if 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 they're still if there's still an opportunity to launch in February, the crew would fly down. They're tentatively now scheduled to arrive here around 3 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Then but we will see. We're still a ways away from. Um, okay, so the ticker just got updated. So it does say so. They're they're actually progressing faster. So we just got the liquid hydrogen fast fill core stage liquid hydrogen fast fill at 12:31. So we do have a shot here in the next half hour or so. And again, I can hang around, but I hope there's some sort of color about how that's going. So because this is where they saw issues with the during the process several times. Well, that's not fair, but I mean they only tanked the vehicle so many times here at Kennedy Space Center, the Artemis 1 vehicle. They did not see that, which is what the oddity is about it, because we didn't see numbers, but they did not consistently see the same behavior from one tanking to another, but they did see elevated hydrogen concentrations more than once. So they obviously saw it on the second launch attempt for Artemis 1, and they saw it. But like for instance, as an example, for the June 2022 wet dress rehearsal, I don't recall them talking about a leak, so to speak, in during this part of the um, during this part of the during this part of the process. They saw the leak when they began doing the engine bleeds, the engine bleed flow. Sorry, taking care of a little bit of business here. Um, yeah, see, and we won't. Yeah, the question is, what are the flow rates? we don't. We they don't quantify that anymore in public. So that is considered that is considered. I don't know whether it's considered export controlled or proprietary or both. But yeah, they don't quantify flow rates and things like that anymore. Um, and I'll just go ahead and goose the. But so again, we were talking in general about being ahead of the timeline, behind the timeline for tanking, and so you can see they're getting to these milestones a little faster than the timelines we were given, but they started at a later time. But I think it's all going to work out, and so um, we could still see the closeout, for instance, assuming that the tanking process goes well, we could see the closeout crew go out to the pad relatively on time. All right, good. So Gopher Gordon's mentioning, yeah, you can see a little bit of venting below the bottom of the mobile launcher deck. It just starting to peak out there. But again, um, we're past slow fill for liquid oxygen, so again, they will be. But yeah, it would be. This isn't the this again. This is not the most favorable angle for watching engine venting. But then again, once they get we will start to see venting from the core stage, but not until they get much closer to the top of the tank. And they have a system called they're liquid level sensors in both propellant tanks, and so they use those to figure out when to begin topping mode, when to begin um, replenish. But then of course the low level sensors, they also use those to determine when to begin fast fill versus slow fill. That that's but eventually, assuming that things go well, we will see the you'll start to see some venting, and you should be able to see that from here again. Um, it wasn't it wasn't quite so windy. Uh, this it was still a little bit breezy, but not that bad. Um, but the liquid oxygen vent is actually on the forward skirt, but then the forward skirt for the core stage kind of um, surrounds the forward dome of the liquid oxygen tank, but the vent kind of points down, and so the wind just takes it wherever it wants to take it because that's just gaseous oxygen. Um, and so I don't like again one of the things that we didn't see on the timeline, which I'd flagged was and when they're going to okay and now 1236 so now we're seeing both commodities for the core stage are in fast fill. So um, that's a good sign for the liquid oxygen side because that means they've 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 gotten into they've gotten past the point in the process where they would tend to see some issues with geysering. And again, they did this procedure um, several times, and so they've accumulated several reps on this, and so the but they're now in fast fill for both liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. And so hopefully, but then as I was talking about, at some point after fast fill begins on the liquid hydrogen tank, they will begin um, the kickstart bleed of the RS-25 engines. And I'm trying, I pulled up or I tried to make a, so yeah, somewhere I didn't, there wasn't necessarily a time, but somewhere in this time frame is when they would begin the kickstart bleed for the RS-25 engines to begin to chill down uh, the fuel side some of the fuel side hardware that needs to be chilled down. It has to be done over a significant period of time, a few hours. So now so they're putting up the stream here in the newsroom. The countdown clock obviously continues, but the so actually not that bad, unless that's maybe that's slow. All right. So I think one of the things somebody was asking, I think it was last night, was asking about expectations, or maybe it was the beginning of the stream. I can't remember now. Unfortunately, things are starting to bleed together, but uh, sort of expectations for the test today. I do think that this is a, maybe I'm speaking too soon, but they did get a lot of experience, operational experience with some of the things, because again, I've mentioned geysering a few times. They actually ran into that problem both in the green run at Stennis and at Kennedy. Um, but uh, they it seemed like they figured that out, because they had that problem, I think, in the first time that they tried loading liquid oxygen on the vehicle here at Kennedy, on the Artemis 1 vehicle. But then I don't recall them seeing issues um, with that afterwards. And so again, the experience of going through this on for both commodities, they've learned a lot of lessons from Artemis 1. And so I think one of the possibilities that's on the table is that this is that this is relatively uneventful. Um, but that still means you've got the other two phases uh, of the test, which is the closeout crew part of it, and then the terminal countdown part of it. And so they could they could they could have an issue that's not as um, that doesn't have as big of an impact as a hydrogen leak, for instance. But if they had an issue that required a couple of days to deal with, then because they don't have very much time in this launch opportunity overall, um, that could be, that's why you have to wait until the entire test is completed. And then again, so that will be something that we'll want to find out. Maybe there will be something that breaks after the test that we don't hear about. But that's why the briefing tomorrow at noon, the post test briefing, is valuable, is just to get a sense of, um, where did everything, after they will take a quick look at the data. Um, and they have, again, they have the support centers up. The SLS Engineering Support Center, I think that's what it's called, which is a part of the Huntsville Operations Support Center at the Marshall Space Flight Center. So they're obviously, they would be on console, and they've been there that way for a while, but they would be very intently watching what's going on right now with the core stage for sure. And then obviously they will be getting the ICPS ready for its chill downs and filling here uh, in the next few hours for sure. So if not, I'd have to go back and look at the timeline, but we'll see. But that's, it's definitely a good sign, and we're seeing things again happening a little bit earlier on the timeline. And so the question is whether will we get what else we will see, because at this point, big picture, I would be interested in getting an update on, again, the engine bleed, which is it's a kick-started bleed where they keep the vent valve closed, and they use a little bit of the pressure in the hydrogen tank to get that bleed flow started through the engines. And then eventually, once the flow's started, then they can open the vent, they can let the tank vent again, and they call that a vented bleed. But that's, that's a long ways. That's farther down the road in the sequence. But it would be nice to get some sort of a heads up that they've started that, because they did see that issue. They did see issues with that during one of the wet dress rehearsal attempts, um, for Artemis 1. So, but if not, then we'll just see. Uh, Trying to think what would be the other things we would see. I don't think we would see. I mean, really, once you get into fast fill, um, the next things would be, again, they were talking about starting the ICPS LH2 chill downs relatively quickly. So that might be the next thing we see. And really, in terms of both tanks, at that point, really what you would be expecting to see if it in a nominal timeline is you'd start to see the core stage liquid oxygen tank. Pardon me. You start to see some venting from the top of the vehicle, and then you'd get into topping and replenish for both of those commodities. But we would perhaps before then uh, we might start to see the ICPS beginning the ICPS liquid hydrogen chill downs, because what it looks like they've done for this time is that they're going to start the liquid hydrogen filling the ICPS liquid hydrogen tank before they're finished with the core stage liquid hydrogen tank. But for the liquid oxygen tank, they're still going to kind of do it in serial. So they're going to get the core stage liquid oxygen tank very close to uh, replenish before they would start into chilling down the liquid oxygen side of the ICPS. So we might see that here before the top of the hour, and or somewhere around there. And um, I'm not sure if we're going to see anything about the engine bleed. That's probably maybe that's again that might be considered to be too. But again, I'm all about the inside baseball stuff, so I would like to see some sort of an indication. Um, but yeah, right now we're not seeing. And the odd thing, the interesting thing is that the the we're getting a feed of the stream here. The stream they actually have up on the monitors here. To me, that's a surprise that it's actually behind the stream that I'm seeing on the computer, which doesn't make a lot of sense unless it's buffered, like unless it's also buffered. Pardon me, I'm going to just go ahead and goose the feed here. You know, see that it buffers a little. Okay, because yeah, that's where it's showing the buffering is when you bump it up past full versus normal speed, and when it catches up, there's a little tiny bit of buffering. We're just about to reach T minus 7 hours on the countdown clock in about a minute. And the countdown, so the clock will count down to T minus 3 hours and 30 minutes, and then it will hold for 40 minutes. And hopefully by that time, by the time that they reach that hold, when they enter that hold, built-in hold, the idea would be for all four propellant tanks to be in stable replenish. And at that point, then they would send the closeout crew out to the pad. And the plan was, I assume, would be the same for today as it would be for launch day, which is that somewhere ahead of getting into stable replenish on all four tanks, the closeout crew would be able to reposition from kind of out here by a roadblock out here by the press site by OSB2, um, the AB11 roadblock. They'd be able to reposition to the AB5 roadblock, which would be out kind of where this camera is, by the split between the crawlerway split between pad 39A, and pad 39B, and they would then be there for the final clearance to go to the pad. But then they have a long day in front of them when they get there, because the procedure they were talking about, the procedure for closing out Orion taking up to 4 hours. And so when they get there, the countdown clock will pick up after a 40-minute hold at T minus 3 hours and 30 minutes, but they could be out there almost all the way until the countdown gets down to the final hold at T minus 10 minutes. So, so we aren't. So possibly the next thing that you might see updated would be that one, and I think that would maybe that's the way that we have to sort of infer that that core stage liquid hydrogen is go the loading is going fine, is that they start. All right, I'm imagining that's not going to be a thing. So, oh, okay, nope, that's something else. Oh, so yeah, we might. So the next thing we might see, it's possible the next update we might see might have to do with the ICPS liquid hydrogen chill downs, um, because they were talking about beginning those uh, before they finished. But again, we don't know. We don't know. Um, we don't know for sure what's the sequence, because they are supposed to start the engine bleed somewhere in this time frame as well. And so they did not mention that in the timeline that they gave us. So again, I don't know whether, I guess I can go check I think the ticker is ending up being more valuable, or well, not more valuable, but just it's a faster way to see to get the latest update on the situation. It's not completely real time at this point, but we'll see. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably end up maybe we'll just see if we get another update here before we get too far past 1 o'clock Eastern. And so then what I'm going to do then is I'm gonna sign off here, and then I'll have to double check, but I do think I was scheduled to be on the NSF live streams later, around somewhere around 2. I'll have to double check that, but I'll take a break here to be ready to do that, and actually have to get plugged uh, into their stuff, so to speak. But so yeah, so if anybody has any questions, um, you can certainly save them until the NSF live stream. Although I know they're already up and running over there. So, but you can ask me over on the NSF live stream later, or you can. But if you have anything that you wanted to ask me before we go, before I sign off here, and then we'll just have to figure it out. I think tomorrow. Uh, I wouldn't imagine that there would be anything that would require a live stream before the briefing. Um, but we'll just have to see. I don't know what's going to happen uh, tomorrow, but hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to some people tomorrow outside of the stream. And so, um, So, but I'll hang on here for I'll hang on here for a few more minutes until the top of the hour, and so which is again, you have to forgive me for those of you who aren't familiar with clock faces and non-digital displays of time. But until 1 p.m. here, and unless something pops up here. Um, but so far, at least from what we can see is that they've started, they've gotten all the way into fast fill for both the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tanks in the core stage, and I don't know if they've caught up to the timeline. They were maybe a little bit. They were maybe they may have started about 45 minutes the after the numbers that we saw, but they've also hit some of these milestones sooner, with the tanking process beginning around 11:40 a.m. and they got to fast fill on both commodities um, within an hour. So the so we'll just see what. So right now the countdown clock is about, it's counting. We're at 6 hours 51 minutes 40 seconds, give or take, and counting. So we're about 3 hours. We're about 3 hours away and change from the next built-in hold. Will be the clock reaches T minus 3 hours and 30 minutes. And between now and then, we should hear about the remainder of the propellant loading milestones. So by the time they reach the hold at T minus 3 hours and 30 minutes, they should be pretty close to wrapping up propellant loading for all four tanks across the two stages. The Yeah, I'm looking at they have the countdown clock up here in the news center. It's obviously separated by what, 70 minutes from the L minus clock that you're seeing. The L minus clock basically is how much time there is until 9 p.m. Eastern, and the countdown clock is more operations. Um, is more um, linked to the operation itself. So yeah, I don't know that they have that. I don't know that they're feeding the countdown clock to anybody. Uh, I know sometimes Spaceflight Now does sometimes show a feed, but I imagine that if they're not showing it, then they probably, and I haven't had a chance to check their stream. So, but if they're not showing it, they probably don't have it, because that's something I know that they usually try to um, show. Okay. So, and then again, before I go, I'll just mention again that one of the couple of things we heard about for the next couple of days was that there's going to be a post-test briefing tomorrow around noon. It's scheduled for noon right now on Tuesday, to let us know, maybe hopefully in a little more detail about what happened in the test. And then the crew is tentatively scheduled to travel here to Kennedy Space Center on Wednesday afternoon, with the arrival around 3 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. So we will see. We'll see how, but we'll see. Here we go. Okay, so before I go, so the ticker's updated So they've started ICPS, liquid hydrogen chill down, and that was something again we that was something that we sort of expected to see, that they're going to do ICPS chill downs earlier. They were going to overlap the tanking process for the liquid hydrogen tanks for both the core stage and the ICPS, and we're now seeing confirmation that that's happened. Um, Not expecting to see a launch date announced tomorrow. They're not. They 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 have not talked about announcing a launch date until the agency level flight readiness review, and I'm not. And again, we're not sure whether that's going to be on Wednesday or not. It could be. It could perhaps. We haven't heard sort of a no earlier than date for the flight readiness review, but I'm pretty sure. Well, that's not a good way of putting it. I would expect that would be a question tomorrow, assuming that the test today is uneventful, that they will get asked when the flight readiness review is planned. Is it planned for Wednesday or not? Um, but I don't know that we know the timing of the flight readiness review right now. I mean, it's dependent on this test, so there's that. Um, but but we did just get that update. That was something that was called out on the timeline, that the ICPS liquid hydrogen chill down was going to start relatively soon after fast fill for core stage LH2 fast fill. And so, I mean, I guess you could certainly take it as it's a good sign. They didn't mention engine kickstart bleed. I don't know where that fits on the schedule, considering this change in the loading procedure, but we'll just, we may not hear anything about that, and that would definitely be something where no news is good news for that. So, but that's kind of the schedule for now, which is um, that they're going to continue the test for today, uh, post test briefing tomorrow midday, and then probably we'll find out at that point when they would uh, when they would when there would be when the flight readiness review would be. But it's of course always it's contingent on the results of the rest of the test as well too. So, but um, let me just double. I will just make one quick check here to see if there was anything else. Fast fill for the ICPS LH2 tank would be closer to half an hour after chill downs begin. So that's probably not for a little while. And then, but next the next things we should see would be the LH2 tank for the core stage should reach topping and replenish, but that's not for probably another hour or so. But those will be the next ones. So I think this is probably a good place to sign off. And this, like I said, this was kind of supposed to be sort of a pregame show, but we at least got a decent idea about the beginning of tanking and that they are progressing into the timeline. Have not no reported major issues, and so now we just have to see. Now we just have to continue to watch, and I'm gonna go. I'm gonna take a little break here, and then you might hear me on the NSF live stream in about an hour. But again, I really appreciate everybody stopping by to watch the stream, and I'll once I get a chance to sort of think figure out my schedule for the rest of the week, I will update. I'll update. I'll make a post or something on my channel about when the next live stream is going to begin, and what's going on tomorrow and the rest of the week. But I'm planning on being here all week and then going to Houston for the launch. But again, thanks for your time, and I will see you guys next time.